So now we understand a little bit about the circumstances behind all of that. And now let's kind of get into a little bit of some details about this parable. Okay? All right. So taking a look, starting in verse number 9, it says that he goes on to tell the people this parable. And so after the chief priest and the teacher of the law came back and said, we don't know where it's from as far as authority, then he says, okay, here's this parable. And the parable just simply goes as follows. You notice he says that a man planted a vineyard, rented it to some farmers, and he went away for a long time. And so here's a man, and a vineyard at that day and time was a very labor-intensive and expensive thing. I mean, if you're going to go and plant a vineyard, it's not a matter of just simply, oh, we're going to go out there, we're going to go crop, and then, at the end of the season, we're going to cut it down. That's it. I mean, you have to go and you have to grow the grapevines. You have to cultivate the grapevines. You have to tend to them and prune them. You have to get them to developing and growing. And so it's not just simply a plant it, grow it, leave it type thing. It's going to be a very intensive process. And some of the bigger grape vineyards of the day, they would have included having a brick wall around them to keep the varmints and critters and people out. They would have had a watchtower that would have been in place to kind of observe and make sure that nobody was getting in there. Didn't need to be. They'd have the old wine press and everything. And so this was a pretty elaborate situation. And so this landowner had a vineyard, and he was going to go away for a while, and he decides to rent it out to some other people, right? And so he rents it out to other people with the idea of when it's harvest time, they're going to give me a portion of the crop. They're going to give me some of its fruit. And so we see that this is kind of like what God did with Israel. As far as the nation of Israel goes, God went and he planted the nation of Israel. He brought them up out of Egypt. He performed miraculous signs. He came and he planted them into the land of Canaan. He gave them the law. He gave them protection. He gave them blessings. He spent many, many years trying to cultivate and trying to grow this nation so that they could be the kind of people that he wanted them to be, which was a people that would come and bring him fruit. But what happened? Well, we see here in the parable that it says at harvest time, in verse number 10, that he sent a servant to the tenants so they would give him some of the fruit of the vineyard, but the tenants beat him and sent him away empty-handed. He sent another servant, but that one also they beat and treated shamefully. He sent a third, and they wounded him and sent him away. And so we see that here this landowner, when harvest time comes, he says, okay, well, it's time for me to go and collect a little bit of what is owed me, what's due. And so, hey, servant, why don't you go over there and get some of my crops? Well, servant goes, they beat him up. No, you're not getting any of this. Says, well, maybe there's a misunderstanding. Maybe they didn't like the guy, Maybe he looked funny. I don't know. So, hey, servant, go over there. Do the same. That happens again too. And so it's like, well, maybe the third time's a charm. Servant, go over there, get my fruit. And they beat him up and sent him away empty-handed too. Right? What's the motivation behind the people there? It's greed. It's a lack of respect for the landowner. It's we want this, and we have an elevated view of ourselves, and so we're going to hang on to it. You see, we've got the nation of Israel, who should have been giving God fruit, who should have been giving God glory, who should have been living their lives for God and for the things of God, but instead they're doing all kinds of other things. And so God sent prophets to them to try to correct them, to try to get them back on track so that the nation of Israel would give God the fruit that he deserves. But instead, they mistreated the prophets. And they persecuted the prophets, and they imprisoned the prophets, and they stoned the prophets, and so on and so forth. And so, continuing back the parable, we see that in verse number 13, the owner of the vineyard said, what shall I do? I will send my son whom I love. Perhaps they will respect him. But in verse number 14 it says, but when the tenants saw him, they talked the matter over. This is the heir, they said, let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. And so they threw him out of the vineyard, and they killed him. they talked it over and they said, you know, this is the heir. Let's kill him and let's seize the inheritance, which really, I mean, if you think about it, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? You know, but the part is just simply the idea that the landowners are saying, hey, this is ours. This isn't the owner, or the renters are saying this is ours. This isn't the landowners. This is ours. And let's take it for ourselves. And here's the greediness. And here's the thing, the parallel, and that is that Jesus is obviously God's Son, whom He loves, that He was sending. And these people were saying, let's kill Him. Now, they weren't saying, let's kill Him so that the inheritance and we can take over the inheritance, but they were saying that if Jesus was permitted to live, that the Romans would come in and take the nation in our place. And so because of that, we need to kill Him. So do you see the parallel there? The parallel is that as the land renters were saying, let's kill the heir, the Pharisees, the chief priests, the Sanhedrin court was saying, let's kill Jesus. Why? Landowners, so that we can keep our place. Pharisees, chief priests, so that we can keep our place as well. And so Jesus just simply asked this very simple question, what's the owner going to do? Now the answer is pretty obvious, isn't it? I mean, you know, here you have a rented vineyard, right? You, instead of getting the fruit that you're due, you've got a servant that's beaten up, a servant that's beaten up, a servant that's beaten up, and now a son whom you love is being killed. You know? Now, of course, in today's time, we'd say, oh, we're going to send the police out to get him. But in that day and time, it's not quite that way. In that day and time, it's going to be, let's exact vengeance. Let's exact justice. And so he says, what's the owner of the vineyard going to do to them? He's going to come and he's going to kill the tenants. He's going to give the vineyard out to others. So what's the implication with this? And that is that here's the nation of Israel, right? And the nation of Israel is not giving God what His due is. And so what's God going to do? God's going to come, He's going to judge them, and then He is going to give that place and that privilege to other people. Now, all throughout the Old Testament, Israel is supposed to be that organization that is supposed to give God the honor and the glory. But because of what they did to Jesus, we see in the book of Acts that now all of a sudden God switches. And God puts that responsibility and that privilege, as a matter of fact, to the New Testament church. And what we're doing here this morning, in terms of bringing God praise, bringing God glory, that's what Israel should have done in the Old Testament. What we should be doing in our lives, as far as being a people that is holy to the Lord, set apart for the Lord, set apart for His use, is exactly what the nation of Israel should have been doing too. They should have been trusting God and following God, and that's what we need to do as well. So we don't need to be arrogant about the situation and think, oh, well, look at us, we're so great, we're so mighty. No, if God did that to the nation of Israel, He could do it with us today too, as well. You see, we've got a place, we've got a responsibility to the Lord, which is to bring Him honor and glory.